They shattered both of her arms, mocked her cries, and abandoned her in the frozen wilderness to die beneath the falling snow, certain that no one would ever come for a woman they believed was worthless. But what they never could have imagined was that high in those lonely, merciless mountains lived a giant of a man, silent, scarred, and feared by everyone who knew of him, who would find her broken body in the storm, carry her back to his remote cabin, nurse her through pain and fever, and, little by little, heal not only the wounds in her bones, but the deep, invisible scars carved into her heart by a lifetime of cruelty.
The winter of 1868 came early to the valley beneath the Rocky Mountains, bringing with it a cold that could stop a man's heart mid-beat. Eleanor Brooks had learned to fear the cold almost as much as she feared the men who'd left her to die in it. She couldn't remember much of that night, only the crack of bone, the laughter that followed, and the strange peace that had settled over her as the snow began to fall. Perhaps dying wouldn't be so terrible after all. Perhaps it was what someone like her deserved. But death didn't come. Instead, something else did. Eleanor felt herself being lifted, felt warmth wrapping around her broken body. Through half-frozen eyelids, she glimpsed a face obscured by beard and shadow, felt arms stronger than any she'd known carrying her as though she weighed nothing at all. She tried to speak, to apologize for being a burden even now, but darkness claimed her before the words could form. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. The crackle of fire, the scent of pine and smoke, pain. God, the pain in her arms was like nothing she'd ever known. She tried to move and couldn't, tried to cry out and managed only a whimper. "Don't." The voice was deep, rough from disuse. "Your arms are broken, both of them. I've set them as best I could." Eleanor forced her eyes open. The cabin was small, one room with rough-hewn walls and a dirt floor. A massive figure sat near the fire, his back to her, broad shoulders hunched forward. Even sitting, he seemed to fill half the space. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'll leave as soon as—" "You'll leave when you can walk." He didn't turn around. Not before. She wanted to argue, to insist she couldn't impose, but exhaustion pulled her back under. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of pain and fever. The mountain man, she heard him moving about the cabin, but rarely saw his face clearly, tended to her with a clinical efficiency that never quite became comfortable. He fed her broth when she could manage it, changed the splints on her arms with careful precision, and always announced what he was about to do before he did it. "I'm going to check the splints now," he would say, his voice carefully neutral, or, "You need to eat. I'm going to help you sit up." Eleanor flinched every time he approached, couldn't help it. Her body remembered hands that hurt, voices that mocked. Even acts of kindness felt like traps waiting to spring. One night, when the fever was particularly bad, she woke to find him pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. In her delirium she cried out, tried to pull away despite the agony it sent through her arms. He stepped back immediately, hands raised. "It's all right. You're safe." "I'm sorry," she gasped. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "Stop apologizing." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "You've done nothing wrong." But she had, hadn't she? She'd been born wrong, shaped wrong. The family that had paid for her passage from Pennsylvania had made that clear enough. They'd expected a bride for their son, someone to work hard and bear children. What they'd gotten instead was Eleanor, too large, too clumsy, too much of everything except what they wanted. "You're supposed to be pretty," the son had said, looking at her with undisguised disgust the day she arrived. "The advertisement said, 'We can't send her back,'" his mother had interrupted. "We already paid. She'll have to work off her debt some other way." The cracks in Eleanor's arms weren't the first injury she'd sustained in that household, only the worst. Working from dawn until long past dark, sleeping in the barn with the animals, eating scraps, none of that compared to the constant chorus of contempt. The way they looked at her, the way they spoke about her as though she couldn't hear. And then the men from town had come. She'd been carrying water from the creek when they'd surrounded her, 5 of them, drunk and looking for entertainment. She'd tried to run, which had only made them laugh harder. When one grabbed her arm, she'd done something she'd never dared before. She'd fought back, shoving him hard enough that he fell. The laughter stopped then, replaced by something colder. "Thinks she's too good for us," one had snarled. "Let's teach her some manners." They'd held her down while their leader took her arms, one at a time, and bent them backward until the bones snapped. The sound had been worse than the pain. The laughter afterward was worst of all. "That'll teach you," he'd said, spitting in her face. "Stay in your place, pig." They'd left her in the snow, left her to freeze and die like she was nothing. But this man, this stranger, had found her, had brought her here, had saved her life, though she couldn't begin to understand why. As the weeks passed and Eleanor's fever broke, she began to observe her unlikely savior more closely. He was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed carved from the mountain itself. His face was hidden behind a thick beard streaked with gray, and scars crisscrossed his visible skin like a map of old violence. He moved with surprising quietness for his size, and he rarely spoke unless necessary. She learned his name almost by accident, overheard when he was talking to himself while checking his trap lines. Caleb Holt. He was methodical in everything he did. Every morning he would stoke the fire, prepare food, check her splints. Then he would go out to run his trap lines, sometimes for hours. He always left her within reach of water and the chamber pot, a humiliation she could barely endure, though he never commented on it or made her feel worse than she already did about needing such assistance. When he returned, he would skin and clean whatever he'd caught, prepare dinner, and sit by the fire working on various tasks, mending traps, treating hides, carving wood. He never sat close to her bed in the corner, always kept the full length of the cabin between them. Eleanor found herself watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice, watching the careful way he handled everything, the precision of his movements. He wasted nothing. Every scrap of hide was used, every bone saved for some purpose. There was a strange kind of poetry in his efficiency, a respect for the lives he took to sustain his own. One evening, about a month into her stay, Eleanor woke from a nap to find him sitting closer than usual, working on something in his lap. Her movement must have caught his attention because he looked up, then quickly away. "Your splints need to come off soon," he said. "Another week, maybe 2. Then you'll need to start moving your arms again. It'll hurt." "I understand." She paused, gathering courage. "Mr. Holt, I need to ask, why did you help me?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Would you have rather I left you to die?" "No, that's not what I meant. It's just most people wouldn't have bothered with someone like me." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't pity, it wasn't disgust. It was something else entirely, something she couldn't quite name. "Most people are fools," he said simply, and returned to his work. That night, Eleanor lay awake long after he'd banked the fire and settled onto his bedroll on the opposite side of the cabin. She realized with a start that she hadn't apologized for her existence even once that day. The thought should have brought relief, but instead it made her cry silently into her thin pillow. Spring came slowly to the mountains. As the snow began to melt and the days grew longer, Eleanor's arms healed enough for the splints to come off. Caleb had been right. Moving them again was agony. Every tiny motion sent fire shooting through her shoulders and elbows, but she gritted her teeth and persisted, determined not to be any more of a burden than she already was. She began helping where she could, awkwardly at first. She couldn't do much with her stiff, painful arms, but she could tend the fire, could organize supplies, could at least try to be useful. Caleb never asked her to help, never expected it, but he didn't stop her either. One afternoon, she found his coat lying across a chair, torn at the shoulder seam. Without thinking, she picked it up, examining the damage. She'd been good with a needle once before everything fell apart. Her arms protested as she threaded the borrowed needle and began to work, but she pushed through the pain. She wanted to give him something, anything, to repay even a fraction of what he'd done for her. She was so focused on her work that she didn't hear him come back inside. Only when his shadow fell across her lap did she realize he was standing there, staring at her hands. "You don't need to do that," he said, but his voice was odd, strained. "I wanted to." She kept her eyes on the stitching. "You've done so much for me. It's not much, but—" He said nothing, just stood there for a long moment before moving away to the other side of the cabin. But that evening, when he put the coat back on, she saw him run his fingers over the mended seam, and something warm unfurled in her chest. The dynamic between them began to shift in small, almost imperceptible ways. Eleanor found herself less afraid to move around the cabin when he was there. Caleb seemed to relax slightly, though he still maintained careful distance. They began to talk more, not about anything important, just small observations about the weather, the animals, the changing season. One night, Caleb coughed through dinner, a deep rattling sound that made Eleanor look up in concern. He waved off her worry, but the coughing continued through the evening, keeping them both awake. Eleanor lay in her corner, listening to him struggle to breathe, and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. This man who'd saved her life was suffering, and there was nothing she could do to help him. The helplessness was worse than the pain in her arms had ever been. By morning, the coughing had subsided, but Eleanor noticed everything about him now. How carefully he moved when he thought no one was watching. The old injuries that clearly still troubled him on cold mornings. The haunted look that sometimes came over his face when he stared into the fire. She wanted to ask about his past, wanted to know what had driven a man to live alone on this mountain, but she didn't dare. Some wounds were too deep for words. Instead, she showed her concern in other ways. She made sure to serve him the best portions at dinner, carefully arranging his plate so the largest pieces were on his side. She stayed awake on nights when she heard him moving restlessly, ready to help if needed, even though he never asked. and she began to notice the little things he did for her in return. The chair by the fire had changed. When she'd first been able to sit in it, it had been a normal chair, narrow and uncomfortable for her frame. But one day, she realized it was different, wider, with arms that gave her space to rest without feeling squeezed. She hadn't seen him make it, hadn't heard him working on it. He'd simply replaced it without comment, as though it had always been that way. The mirror in the cabin hung lower than it had before. She was sure of it. Before, when she'd been forced to look at her reflection while washing, she'd had to see her whole body, had to confront the full reality of her shape. Now, she could see only her face and shoulders. A small mercy, perhaps, but one that made her eyes sting with unshed tears. And there were other things. The way he always stood between her and the door when the wind was particularly cold. The wooden comb that appeared on the shelf by her bed, smoothed and polished until there were no rough edges to catch in her hair. The extra blanket that somehow materialized when the nights grew colder again. None of it was ever mentioned. None of it was ever expected to be reciprocated. It simply was. Eleanor realized, with a shock that made her heart race, that she was falling in love with this silent, scarred mountain of a man, and the realization terrified her. She was still that woman, after all, still too large, still unwanted, still someone who inspired disgust rather than affection. Whatever kindness Caleb showed her was surely just decency, just the basic humanity of someone who couldn't bear to see another creature suffer. It couldn't be more than that. It couldn't. But oh, how she wished it could be. Summer arrived, bringing with it longer days and warmer nights. Eleanor's arms, while still stiff and aching in the mornings, had healed enough that she could do most tasks without assistance. She'd taken over more of the household duties, not because Caleb asked, but because she needed to contribute, needed to feel like less of an imposition. She'd also begun to explore the area immediately around the cabin, never straying far, but desperate for some fresh air and movement after months confined indoors. Caleb never told her not to go, but she noticed he timed his return from the trap lines to coincide with when she typically came back inside. One afternoon, while collecting wild herbs near the creek, Eleanor heard voices, male voices, growing closer. Her blood turned to ice. She recognized one of those voices. She tried to run, but her feet tangled in her skirt, and she fell hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. By the time she'd scrambled upright, 3 men on horseback had rounded the bend in the trail. The one in front, the one who'd broken her arms, smiled when he saw her. It was not a kind smile. "Well, well," he drawled, dismounting. "Look what crawled out of the snow. We thought you died, pig. Disappointed to see we were wrong." Eleanor backed away, arms wrapped protectively around herself. "Please, I'm not bothering anyone. Just let me—" "Let you what? Keep living out here like some kind of animal?" He laughed, and the others joined in. "Maybe we should finish what we started. Do the world a favor." They advanced on her, and Eleanor felt her back hit a tree. There was nowhere left to run. She opened her mouth to scream, but terror had stolen her voice. Then a shadow fell over them all. Caleb had appeared so silently that even the horses hadn't sensed him coming. He stood now between Eleanor and the 3 men, and though he said nothing, his very presence seemed to make the air heavier, more dangerous. "Move aside, mountain man," the leader said, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "This doesn't concern you." "It does now." Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Leave, don't come back. Or what? You'll fight all three of us? The man tried to laugh, but it came out uncertain. She's not worth dying over, old man. She's just a fat... He didn't get to finish. Caleb moved with shocking speed for a man his size, and suddenly the speaker was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose. The other two men reached for their weapons, but Caleb was faster, disarming them with brutal efficiency. And then Eleanor saw something that made her heart stop. Caleb's hands were around one man's throat, and the look in his eyes, pure, focused rage, said clearly that he intended to kill. "Don't touch him!" The words burst from Eleanor before she could think, before she could question. She ran forward, placing herself between Caleb and his target, her hands on his chest. "Don't touch him! He's good! He saved me!" She was crying now, couldn't seem to stop. "Please, Caleb, please don't! They're not worth it. You're not like them. Please." For a terrible moment, nothing changed. Then slowly, Caleb's hands loosened. The man dropped, gasping and coughing. Caleb stepped back, his chest heaving, looking at his own hands as though they belonged to someone else. The three men scrambled for their horses, mounting quickly and fleeing back down the trail. Eleanor barely noticed them go. All her attention was on Caleb, who had turned away from her, his whole body rigid. "Caleb," she said softly, reaching out. "Don't." The word was harsh. "Go inside. Pack your things." "What? No, I said go inside." He whirled on her, and she saw something broken in his eyes. "I almost killed a man in front of you. I lost control. You saw what I am, what I'm capable of. You need to leave before I hurt you too." "You would never hurt me." "You don't know that." He was shouting now, his voice raw. "You don't know anything about me. My wife, I had a wife once. She died because of me. Because I couldn't protect her, because the town doctor wouldn't come out for someone married to a man like me. She died screaming, and our baby died with her. Everyone I care about gets hurt. Everyone. So you need to go before I destroy you too." The confession hung in the air between them, terrible and final. Eleanor saw him clearly then, not just the scarred mountain man, but the grieving husband, the father who'd lost everything, the man who'd isolated himself because he believed he was cursed. She understood that feeling, understood believing you were poison to everyone around you, understood thinking the world would be better if you simply ceased to exist. "If you send me away," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "I'll die inside, not because of them, not because of what they did to me, because I love you." The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that couldn't be taken back. Caleb stared at her as though she'd spoken in a foreign language. "You can't," he said hoarsely. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do know." Eleanor stepped closer, her heart thundering. "I love you, Caleb Holt. I love the way you check your traps with respect for what you've taken. I love how you announce everything before you do it, so I won't be afraid. I love that you made me a chair I could sit in without feeling crushed, and lowered the mirror so I wouldn't have to see everything I hate about myself. I love you, and I don't care if you think that's foolish or if you think I'm cursed too. Send me away if you must, but don't lie to yourself about why. Don't pretend it's for my own good when it's really because you're afraid." "I am afraid," he whispered. "I'm terrified. I thought loving me would kill you. I thought—" His voice broke, and then this enormous man, this mountain of strength and silence, collapsed to his knees in the dirt and began to weep. Great, tearing sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and ancient, a grief that had been locked away for too long. Eleanor knelt beside him, wrapped her arms around him as best she could, and let him cry. She cried, too, for all the pain they'd both carried, all the years of believing they were unworthy of love, of basic kindness, of existing at all. "It's losing you that will kill me," Caleb finally managed. "Not loving you, losing you." "Then don't lose me," Eleanor said. "Keep me. I'm already yours if you want me." He pulled back enough to look at her, really look at her, and Eleanor forced herself not to look away. Let him see her tear-stained face, her red eyes, everything she usually tried to hide. Let him see all of it and decide. "I want you," he said, his voice rough and honest. "God help me. I want you more than I've wanted anything in years. But I can't promise you easy days. I can't promise you'll never regret this." "I don't need easy days." Eleanor smiled through her tears. "I just need you. I need someone who sees me as human, who doesn't flinch when they look at me, who makes me feel like maybe, just maybe, I'm worth something after all." "You're worth everything," he said fiercely. "Don't you see that? You're brave and kind and strong. You mended my coat with broken arms. You cry when I'm sick. You stood between me and my worst self because you believe I'm good even when I don't believe it myself. If anyone is getting a better deal here, it's me." They stayed there, kneeling in the dirt, holding each other until the sun began to set. Then, slowly, they helped each other stand and walked back to the cabin, hand in hand. That night, Caleb didn't sleep on the far side of the room. He pulled his bedroll next to Eleanor's corner close enough that she could reach out and touch him if she needed to, far enough that she never felt crowded. And for the first time since the night he'd found her in the snow, Eleanor slept without nightmares. The weeks that followed had a strange, dreamlike quality. Eleanor and Caleb moved around each other carefully, learning the boundaries of this new thing between them. They talked more, sharing pieces of their pasts in small, manageable increments. Caleb told her about his wife, Sarah, about the life they'd tried to build together before everything fell apart. Eleanor told him about her family back east, about the poverty that had made becoming a mail-order bride seem like her only option, about the slow erosion of her self-worth under constant criticism and cruelty. "I used to think I was the problem," she said one evening as they sat by the fire. "That if I could just be different, smaller, prettier, quieter, then people would treat me better. It took me years to realize that the problem was never me. It was them." "But you still believe it sometimes," Caleb said. "It wasn't a question." Eleanor nodded. "Don't you? Still believe that you bring bad luck, I mean?" "Every day." He stared into the flames. "Every time I look at you, I think about all the ways this could go wrong, all the ways I could fail you. And every time I look at you," Eleanor countered, "I think about how you're the only person who ever looked back and saw someone worth saving. We're both broken, Caleb. Maybe that's why we fit." He reached over and took her hand, something he did more easily now, though he still always gave her time to pull away if she wanted. "Marry me?" Eleanor's breath caught. "What? Marry me?" he repeated, turning to face her fully. "I know I'm not much of a catch. I live on a mountain. I've got more scars than a man should survive, and I'm not good with words. But I love you, Eleanor Brooks. I love you so much it scares me worse than any bear or winter storm. So marry me, Let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." "You already deserve me," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "And I already deserve you, so yes, yes, I'll marry you." They were wed a month later in the small valley below the cabin. A traveling preacher happened through, one of the wandering men of God who brought faith to the frontier settlements, and agreed to perform the ceremony. There were no other guests, no fancy dress or elaborate decorations. Eleanor wore her cleanest dress, and Caleb wore his mended coat. The mountains stood witness, indifferent and eternal. "Do you, Caleb Holt, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. I don't promise easy days, but I promise I'll never break you." "And do you, Eleanor Brooks, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do. You already healed me." The preacher looked between them, seeming to sense that something profound was happening beyond the simple exchange of vows. He smiled and said, "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." The ring Caleb slipped onto Eleanor's finger was silver, handmade from a coin he'd melted down and shaped himself. It fit perfectly. That night, they lay together in Caleb's bed, their bed now, and Eleanor marveled at how safe she felt. This man could crush her with one hand, but instead he held her so gently she might have been made of glass. He touched her like she was precious, like she was beautiful, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor almost believed it. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For finding me, for saving me, for seeing me." Caleb pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for letting me." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The winter was hard, and Eleanor discovered she was pregnant in the coldest part of it. Fear gripped them both. Memories of what had happened to Sarah making every day feel like walking a tightrope. But Caleb was different now, less isolated. He'd swallowed his pride and made contact with a midwife in the nearest settlement, a no-nonsense woman named Martha, who agreed to come when the time came, weather permitting. Eleanor's pregnancy was difficult. She was sick for months, could barely keep food down. Caleb fretted over her constantly, torn between wanting to care for her and being terrified that his care wouldn't be enough. "I'm not Sarah," Eleanor told him one night when his worry was particularly obvious. "What happened to her wasn't your fault, and it won't happen to me. We're prepared this time. Martha knows to come. We'll be all right." "You can't know that." "No," she agreed, "I can't. But I believe it anyway. And I need you to believe it too, or this fear will poison everything good we've built." He held her close, his hand resting protectively over her growing belly. "I'll try." When her labor started in early spring, Caleb rode through a mudslide to reach Martha. He brought her back, half drowned and exhausted, but he brought her back. And when Eleanor's screams filled the cabin, the same screams that must have haunted his nightmares for years, he stayed at her side, holding her hand, whispering encouragement even when his voice shook with terror. "You can do this," he said. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived things that would have killed most people. You can do this." And she did. Their son came into the world screaming, red-faced and healthy. Martha placed him in Eleanor's arms, and Caleb wept openly, overcome with relief and love and the sudden staggering weight of possibility. They'd been given another chance, both of them, a chance to be more than their wounds. They named him Samuel, after Caleb's father, Samuel Holt, who would grow up knowing nothing but love, from parents who understood its value because they'd lived without it for so long. 2 years later, on a warm summer morning, Eleanor stood in the doorway of their cabin and watched Caleb chase their laughing son through the wildflowers. Samuel squealed with delight as his father scooped him up, tossing him gently into the air before catching him again. The sight made her heart so full it hurt. She thought about the woman she'd been that terrible night in the snow, convinced she deserved to die. She thought about the broken arms, the cruel laughter, the certainty that she would never be loved. And she thought about this man, this beautiful, damaged man who'd found her and refused to let her go. Neither of them was perfect. They both still had hard days, moments when old wounds ached or old fears resurfaced. But they faced them together now, and that made all the difference. The mountain that once hid a broken man now echoed with a child's laughter and a woman who finally believed she was worthy of love. And in the evening, when the family gathered around their fire, Eleanor would sometimes catch Caleb watching her with an expression of wonder, as though he still couldn't quite believe his luck. "What are you thinking?" she'd ask. And he'd smile, something he did so much more easily now, and say, "Just that I'm grateful for the snow that night, for having the courage to look when I might have passed by, for you not giving up on either of us." "I could never give up on us," Eleanor would reply. "You taught me that I'm worth fighting for, and so are you." Outside, the wind would whisper through the pines, and the mountains would stand eternal, witnessing this small family carved from pain and loss, but held together by something stronger than either, a love that healed instead of hurt, that built instead of broke, that proved, against all odds, that even the most wounded hearts can find their way home.